The last thing I want to discuss with complex numbers is how to graph them. Because complex numbers contain an imaginary piece, and these don't really exist in a traditional XY axis. What will happen is that we will take an XY axis, but we will relabel that. So we'll relabel the x-axis will really be the real axis, and the y-axis that we know of will be our imaginary axis. So when we're asked to graph a point, we have to identify that the number without the I is what we call the real piece. So we see a -4, so just go over to -4. And the imaginary piece is the piece that has the I in it. So we will go up to 3, and we graph a complex number. It'll be a dot, just like on an XY axis, but we'll get that from the imaginary piece and the real piece. So you just have to know how to identify those. Let's try one more. So again, when you see a complex number, the complex number, we have to see the real piece and the imaginary piece. So just go over to the real piece, -1, go up to 5, and graph your dot. Now, you might ask, well, what happens if we have a number that doesn't have one of those pieces? In other words, if, let's say I have a point B that has just an imaginary piece. So what you have to know is that if there's no real piece, it's not there. And so we'd go up or right, left in the real direction. We'd go 0 and up to 5. Point B would be right on the axis. And the same thing is true if we have a real number, let's say 3, and that is also a complex number. Complex number, remember, has a real piece and an imaginary piece. So if it doesn't have an imaginary piece, think of that as being a 0i. So if I were to graph 3, where do I graph 3 normally? 1, 2, 3, and that would be our point. I'll label it C so we can keep our notes straight. So graphing a point in the complex number system will be similar to how we graph XY points, but we'll graph it real and imaginary. Going the opposite way, let's try to see if we can read what this point is. So again, remember, this is the real, this is your X, or typically what we call our A, this is our Y, or in a complex system, this is what we call our imaginary part, or our B. So if we go over 2 in the real direction, that'll be our 2, our real point. If we come down here, 1, 2, 3, 4, -4, that's our imaginary number. To read a point, think of real. Real is our real part and our imaginary. So our real is how much we go in our XY. So we're going over here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Again, this example, we go down in the imaginary 1, 2, 3. So that would be our imaginary number. That's all there is to graphing complex numbers.